I really want to know, what does Pan-Africanism mean to you, and what was it like creating with other Africans?
I met Akin in 2012, the first time I ever launched my first film, and it was such a refreshing moment to meet, fellow like-minded people from across the continent who just wanted to really tell our own stories. And that was where the connection was from. We were Africans from all over Africa who were telling stories about Africa.
All right, you guys, let's get into first.
There is a movement promoting our stories, and many of us grew up with a strong craving for images we can relate to. Production teams, writers, creative heads have come together to tell stories, and this podcast is their voice. The themes covered are very relevant to the Black community, and anyone concerned by the social and racial injustices that are in place to stifle this voice. The Pan-African voice is not easily heard, and here we talk about our movies, that film or doc which you heard about but didn't get to see. What was the story? Where can I watch it? It now has a voice. Tune in. We walk you through these stories and interview the filmmakers. Welcome. Karibu sana. Karibu sana.
And starting right on the lens. Ready? And action.
Kunemihlaba emithathu. Umhlaba wabaphilayo.
Sewuqalile futhi.
Umhlaba wabangakazalwa. Nomhlaba wabafileyo. Ukuhlanganisa le mihlaba. Isihlahla sempilo. Kusona kuvela imilingo. Kwaba ukuzalwa kwaba nesibindi.
You're special.
If I was special, trust me, I'd know.
Ingane yami yafa malume.
Igazi lonesibindi kuphela lingasindisa ingane yakho.
Wena ukhona baba.
Ufika makunobungozi. Ufikela ukuzosivikela.
Kukhona into eyenzakala ngaphakathi kwakho.
Brave ones, fear nothing, for they serve right and are determined in rooting out evil. You must give the people of Ilanga hope. Go home and save the people of Ilanga.
Ngonesibindi.
So here we go with yet another one. In this episode of the Pan-African Film podcast, we're interviewing Tosh Gitonga, and he's dialing in all the way from Nairobi, Kenya, and we are giving him a big welcome. Tosh Gitonga has been a director and award-winning director across the continent. But in this episode, we're going to be covering the Netflix original show, The Brave Ones, which you also directed. And just give a little bit about the plot so that for the audience dialing in or who haven't watched it, they know a little bit about what we're talking about. So The Brave Ones is about an almighty goddess that kind of reincarnates herself into this young woman during basically a near-death experience. So Nsiki, who's played by Dandile Nkosi, would chip in here, Tosh, if I'm saying it wrong. And she did an amazing job, I thought. Nsiki, with this reincarnation, has to harness her divine powers and try to avenge her sister's death, and also protect her entire family from potential destruction. So it's really intense, captivating story, right? And I was talking to Sydney here, and the colors, it was just so gripping. These are just some of the things that came to mind as we were watching them. It was really beautiful to watch. It was engaging, very captivating. And some of the themes that were covered are obviously like, this was very much an origin story, which I love. Injustice, corruption, superpowers, and a family, I would say. Yeah, again, Sydney, if you want to chip in, those are like the main, I'd say, topics that came to mind. And I love The Brave Ones primarily because I felt it was a unique concept in the sense that there was kind of like high-level production, right? And it does include the topics of like superpowers and injustice together, which for me was very unique with that backdrop, with the Pan-African setting.
Yes, I think adding kind of like that supernatural feel to it gave it more of a family-friendly approach. And like Anna said, the colors and the vibrance is something that really stuck out to me. Seeing Africa, it just looked very, very beautiful and eye-catching. And she mentioned high-level production, which is really refreshing. I'm first generation, and I know a while back I would have never thought to see a very well-produced and high-level produced piece of media of an African diaspora being advertised and put onto Netflix. I think that was something that was very, very refreshing to see, and like I'm happy to see it. And that, there's more growth with African creatives being put on these mainstream platforms. It's really great to see.
Yeah, I mean, there's never been a lack of talent or creativity. I think for the longest time, what we've suffered from is the marketability of what comes out of Africa. As you're aware, most of Africa is seen as developing, and some of this stuff, like say entertainment, because it's at the end of the day, entertainment is seen as a luxury, so it's not something that attracts investment. And also a lot of what our culture has been. I tried to trace where we lost our culture of the art, because if you look back, Africans were full of life, full of culture. There was dance in the villages. There was, art and painting was something that was with us. And at one point, we kind of lost it. I do know that we lost it in the time of colonialism, where, we were not allowed to express ourselves in that way. And then it went and led into a space where we were not allowed to do art, so to speak. And so it's never taken as a serious career. Most Africans who are into the arts have had to fight, to become who they are. I know many people who have gone and gotten the doctor degrees, lawyer degrees, given them to their parents, and then been, okay, I'm off to be the painter I want to be. I'm off to be the dancer I want to be. And so that is what has really set us back in terms of, more creative and quality stuff coming from our end. And it's only now that I think with the world opening up, the world of the internet, it's no longer possible to keep something compressed. With the YouTube, people can now go and make content and just post it up for people to see. So I think that has been what's led to us being able now to get to a place where we're able to start showcasing who we really are or can be.
That's definitely the way things seem to be evolving. But back to the show itself, it was only released in September of 2022, so quite recently. And then again, to add to your repertoire for our listeners who maybe don't know you as well, you're won multiple awards for the feature Nairobi Half-Life in 2015, as well as other TV productions such as Country Queen, just to name a few of the work you've done over the years. So congratulations. And it's really, really, we're all really grateful to have you here today. But, within the Brave Ones itself, what really fascinated me and why I wanted it on our Pan-African podcast is that the story is very much so Pan-African in itself, with the creator, Akino Motoso, being of, I think, Nigerian origins, but the show having such a heavy South African production, and yet featuring, directors like yourself who are of Kenyan origins. I really want to know, what does Pan-Africanism mean to you, and what was it like creating with other Africans?
I met Akin in 2012, the first time I ever launched my first film in the Durban Film Festival. And it was such a refreshing moment to meet, fellow like-minded people from across the continent who just wanted to really tell our own stories. And that was where the connection was from. We were Africans from all over Africa who were telling stories about Africa.
What festival did you meet at? I didn't catch that.
Durban Film Festival, where I launched my first film, Nairobi Half-Life. And that's where I first met Akim. And a bunch of other filmmakers that are doing a lot of beautiful work now, like the director of Blood Psalms, which is a show much right now, which is like our African, I would call it our African God. If you haven't seen it, please go and see it. It's insane. So, so we met in a
Can you repeat the title again? Sorry.
Blood Psalms. Blood, then Psalms like the verse, like the Bible.
Okay.
Like the Bible, yes.
And that's everyone on
Showmax. That's on Showmax. I don't know if you can access Showmax, yeah. But if you look for it on YouTube, you should see the trailer and see what I mean. And so there was a need for us to, there was happiness to meet other people who are really trying to tell our stories. And if you look at what the Brave One is, it's what the Nigerians have been doing and what has been called witchcraft, which is really our ancestral beliefs. All of us, the whole of the continent, wherever we come from, there has been stories and tales, folklore stories of what was before. We had the ancestors, we had the gods, and those are the stories which remain largely untapped. And that's part of the Brave Ones was tapped into a folklore of that nature. So it was a no-brainer for me to be part of the team that was going to bring this to life. Even from my own culture, I've gone through the stories of what folklore stories or who our gods were. We also have our Kenyan or East African version. As you know, also how the migration happened. People in the South, they will speak. And the more you hear the language, like especially when I was shooting the Brave Ones, because I don't speak the language, the more I had it every day, the more I started making out words that were kind of, and then I would ask, does that mean this and this? And how did you know? And vice versa. The other day I was shooting with a South African. The more he had Swahili, the more there was words that started to make. He'd be like, that sounds like, is that? So it's all interconnected, and it's so much untapped yet. And that's the beauty.
That's really interesting to hear that even though you guys were coming from separate parts of Africa, there was still some sort of familiarity to bring everybody together to create this project. But if language wasn't the only challenge, what would you say the challenges were within this story, and how were you able to overcome them?
I think the biggest challenge when you have, is for a director, even if I speak about the Brave One, is the major challenge is really because you're working within a team and there's a showrunner, like in this case was a king. So you have to align your own visual understanding and your own storytelling understanding to what the showrunner has set up. And that was for me the biggest challenge, turning my own creativity into that vision, because at the end of the day, the show has to look the same. So I had to be aware of how I approached my scenes. I had to be aware of how I framed my scenes. There's a way every director has a signature of how they tell a story. And so you come in and then now you have to follow a certain pattern because this is what has been set. And that can be quite challenging. But after a few days, I was able to get in line and get going, and also for the DP, he had to work with, we were 3 directors, 4 actually. So he had to work with this different mind and still try to maintain the same look and the same, kind of facing so that the show doesn't look different. The language wasn't so difficult for me because I had script continuity people. Maybe it would have been a bit of my shortcoming if then I was not able to grasp the little bits, but you can only see them in the performance. And that's the beauty of it. It's the beauty of this medium. Even if you don't understand, you can understand from how somebody says it. And you just know there's a bit there. That hit a nerve. That was a moment for them. And so I relied also so much on that to make sure I was, getting the points that I needed to get.
Yeah, I think you kind of answered what I was going to ask next, in the sense that I was curious, given your repertoire and career, how you find that transition when you're directing films as opposed to TV episodes, and what the main differences are, and also like if you have a preference.
It's quite an interesting question. I'm about to do a series, which is a young adult series. So I'm the showrunner. I'm going to set the precedents for the other directors. I've done films. I think films, in a way, it's one lump sum, and films are driven way more by a lot of all the elements that bring film together, especially the cinematography, the costuming, the design, all these bring out films even more, while TV is more driven by the story. And TV is more about the emotion of the characters and what the characters bring to the table more than anything. But we're constantly, I think of late, if you look at a lot of series and movies, filmmakers are constantly bridging that gap. I think we're more pushing to make sure that even the series have the same, they leave you mesmerized by the cinematography, mesmerized by the production design, mesmerized by the costuming. And I think we're striving more and more. We'd rather make less episodes, but give a more epic outcome, so to speak, which I think is the space I want to be in. I don't think I want to be in the space of long series that, become about talking heads. And that's all the storyline is what matters more than anything else, because then I feel it takes away from the whole medium and the whole reason why we are interested in it in the first place.
Yeah, I get that. I know that we touched on Africa's growth within the entertainment industry a little bit at the beginning, but besides marketing, what else would you say are the main changes that you've noticed when it comes to Africa's media creation and stuff? Or where do you see it headed?
I think our biggest shortcoming is that our own investors are not yet bought into it. And when I say that, I mean the Africans who have money have not really started investing in it, because then they invest in us to tell our own stories. Well, we'll start to see if the foreigners invest into the African film industry, then they choose how the stories are going to be told. For example, Antoine Fuqua is doing a Shaka Zulu series in South Africa. The money is coming from America. So, of course, they will dictate who tells the story, how the story is told, because at the end of the day...
Just to chime in there, I think he just did that new film, the Apple original, and it's interesting. Emancipate with Will Smith, but also featuring our Kenyan American, forget his name. Gabriel, right.
Yeah. So I think that's my biggest fear, that if we don't have our own investors investing in us, then we're not able to grow and be the ones that are telling our own stories. And I mean, charity begins at home. If you believe in your own, the faster you grow. Africa is secondary to America, to the North American market. We're secondary. So we're never going to be really the biggest. And so the growth then may not be as fast as if the growth was coming from home. But I think in Nigeria, it's much better. The Nigerians do believe in themselves. You can already see the heavy investments coming from their own people. Maybe they will set the precedent so that the rest of Africa follows in that footsteps. But yeah, that's, for me, if we had more of us investing in us, the growth will be phenomenal.
Sorry, why exactly do you think that our own investors aren't taking that chance in investing?
I think it goes back to what I was trying to say earlier. I mean, if you dig deep, this is something that happened during the colonial time. The arts were suppressed. When we had the colonialism, when we had the rebellions, art was a major thing. Dance is how people called each other, and how they made decisions was bringing people together during, dances. And this was discouraged from then because that's how they felt people connected. Emotion came through, the arts. And so that had to be discouraged. And I think it just kept on to the narrative that the only good jobs were white collar jobs. That's why we have that white collar suit and tie, and it's brainwashing in a way, which has been done over many years. Hopefully it will get over now in the new generations. But that's why you find like my parents who were born in the 50s and 60s, you could not tell them that you want to be a musician or an artist. They insisted you have to be a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer. And so you can imagine if that's the attitude towards the arts, then what does that mean about investing into it?
Yeah, I hear you. The other interesting thing, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, is that this is not your first Netflix original. How does working on Netflix productions differ from other work experiences you've had?
Actually, this is my first original because from my market, the market is not big enough for an original yet. So what's happening in my market is licensing and then co-productions. I'm amongst the first people to do co-productions in Netflix, which are a bit higher than the acquisition. Country Queen also was a co-production. There was a huge difference working on the original, which is the Brave Ones. The budgets are much better. The story, the scale is all much bigger than what we're trying to do here, because then it's being spent in my market is not as much because the numbers don't match. So what I've really been obsessed with is working with an opportunity that I get from Netflix to just try and grow our audience, because I know we can make the films as good as the South Africans, as good as the UK, or as good as America. We have the skill sets. I mean, if you even look into Hollywood right now, you will find little gems of, there's an editor working on, right now as I speak, I know of an editor who's working on Criminal Minds or something, in Hollywood. We have a DP who's shooting Nicki Minaj videos. We have little gems of our own people in these big markets. So we can make, quality productions, well written, well thought out, well produced. We just fall short on the budget and the market point of view.
I understand. And is there any actor that you have worked with that has made your work experience within the entertainment industry memorable, or left you or given you some sort of piece of advice, or just someone that resonates with you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, maybe in terms of a director, because I've got a mentor. Tom Tikwa was one of the biggest German directors. I think a lot of how I approach film was really influenced by him, made me understand about detail. And if you look at his films, they are insanely magnificent. Like if you're talking about the Perfume, the story of a murderer. I don't know if you've seen that film, set in the 18th century, insane. And just how he approaches films, or even me being able to follow him. When I was doing a film called Cloud Atlas, there was a film called Cloud Atlas with Tom Hanks, major Ben Whishaw, major actors. I got to spend a day with him, and just the level of preparation and approach to this craft, blows your mind. I think it's really been my mentor director. I haven't really gotten to work with the big international, maybe Matthew Modine, we could say, who at the time we were working with him as a second AD on a film that they did here. But really the person who's been personal to me is been my mentor was Tom Tikwa, big German director. Done films like The International, Perfume, The Story of a Murderer, Cloud Atlas with Tom Hanks. And I got to spend a day with him in Berlin while he was making Cloud Atlas with the Wachowskis. So I met the Wachowskis too, really nice people. So just the approach, that they had to making these films, the level of the detail instills something in me, to just focus on the craft and focus on the details and just make sure you put in the best out. And eventually then when it comes out, and I keep telling a lot of people I work with, it's not genius. It's just meticulous. That's all.
Yeah. I know that you talked a little bit about a short series that you were kind of working on. Is that the only thing that you have in the works, or what are any other future plans that you have that you're willing to share with us?
Yeah, I've got a series in the works called Volume that's coming to Netflix next year. It's a young adult series that's touching on what the young people are going through. One of the storylines is addressing mental health, and we're actually in the middle of a break because we lost one of our actors to mental health and suicide. So it's never meant more to me to make this series than it now means even more to make this series because it's a subject that I feel in Africa we're not touching on, and it's really a big issue. So that's coming up. I've got an action film, female-led. Quite excited about that. We're trying to partner with some company I cannot talk about right now. It's looking promising. All the support is looking that we may be able to film that next year, and a couple of more series that are in the works development. But yeah, in terms of what's ready to be filmed, those are the two big projects in the future, the near future, 2022.
Yeah. That's awesome. I actually also, based on what you were talking about earlier, wanted to go a bit off script and ask you, what recommendations do you have? Like you've talked about, some of the challenges for artists in Africa, some of the lack of investment and what have you. Like what advice would you give to our listeners who might be, trying to be directors or trying to expose the content, or even like to the diaspora, like you said, we have all these other resources that we can tap into, right? And elevate our creations. What words of wisdom or advice do you want to share to our listeners who might fall into those categories?
That is always easy. Hollywood was built in 140 years or so. So are the rest of the industries that are thriving now. We're still a child. We're still a crawling child in Africa. So at this point, we need to stop looking at what Hollywood is, stop looking at what the UK is, and focus on building up. Where I think as Africans or young creatives coming up, there's a lot of hunger, which is good, but there's also a hurry to become the next Scorsese, overnight, and we're forgetting that there's so much work to be done, So we need to focus on collaborating because, again, what I've seen with us is a lot of individualism and need to become a star. And it takes longer, So for young creatives now, work together, bring your skill sets together, build from the ground up and not be in a hurry. Focus on the journey. It's also pleasant. And then, that will grow us so much faster than wanting glory tomorrow.
I love it. It's like roll your sleeves up and get ready to dig in, join hands, but like it's going to be a long road, right? Don't think you can roll your sleeves up and then it's the red
overnight. Yeah.
Next.
Yeah.
I love it. I think it's applicable, to be honest, across the industries in terms of expectations for our continent.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thanks again. If you want to add any like personal fun facts, like social media or like website information, this is like an opportunity. I don't know if you want to say, follow me at.
Yeah, you can follow me at the African Director _ I post all the stuff I do there. So we've got a rom-com coming out soon, Disconnect. It's going to be coming out sometime in January, and we're just going to be posting the trailer soon. So please, wherever you are, look out for it. Watch so that we can get more productions made out of Africa.
Thank you, Tosh. That gives me hope and excited for what's to come for us to see and give us representation, really.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the work you guys are doing. It's important. As I said, all of us coming together, doing the little we can, magnifying where we can. It's the way to go.
Right. Every little bit helps. Every little bit counts.
Every little bit
counts.
Yeah.
Okay. It's good to see you. Thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks
Thank
again.
you. Thank you. Have
Bye-bye.
a
Have a good one.
And another one. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of the Pan-African Film Podcast. We are now on Spotify and Instagram. Just search Pan-African Film Podcast to follow and like us there. Our new platform is 360 Africa. That's 360 Africa. And we want to thank our Kenyan Vibe partners. Shout out to the KV Squad. Last but not least, we thank our editor Ace. Please send us your feedback, like, follow, and comment.